Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us this morning as we gather to hear about this important topic. I'm very conscious when we're talking about the topic of family violence that I'm part of the group that is most responsible for it. And so it feels just ever so slightly odd to be introducing the forum. But as one of our speakers reminded me, unless men take part in this conversation, then there's going to be no change. I want to begin by acknowledging that we meet today on Aboriginal land. Here at St Luke's, we acknowledge the Wurundjeri people and their sovereignty over the lands and waters of this area. As we come to this place and meet, we honour their elders past, present and emerging, and we welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people present. And we pray that in the wisdom and power of the Holy Spirit, we might work together for reconciliation and justice in this land. Today's forum brings to us three speakers who will share with us different perspectives on family violence from their different areas of expertise and experience. This is not going to be an easy thing to listen to. This is not light entertainment, but it is a very important topic. For those of you who are on Zoom, thank you for joining us online. We have, I think, almost as many people on Zoom as we have in person at the moment. And so it's good that you're able to join us here today too. So, if you have questions, please hold them to the end of people's presentations, but we will be allowing for questions, and I'll bring a microphone around so that people on Zoom can hear the questions of the people Tom's got the microphone, he's going to bring it around. And if you've got questions on Zoom, again, you could either type them into the chat box or you can ask to be put on the screen, and we'll put you up on the screen and you can ask your question that way.
1800RESPECT is a referral service, and they can pretty much cover anything you need. Safe Steps will get someone who's a victim out of a property within hours and accommodated safely. But if there's immediate danger, triple O every single time. One of the myths about family violence is it's rare and it doesn't affect many people. That's absolutely not true. Family violence has been a hidden and underreported problem, but is a very widespread social issue in Australia and around the world. Lauren Calloway recently printed a document regarding the stats in time for us to all know them prior to Christmas. Victoria Police attended approximately 90,000 serious family violence and sexual assault incidents in the 12 months to September 2021. Victoria Police responded to 225 family violence reports every day. By the way, that's 335 reports on Christmas Day, and that's one every 6 minutes. Victoria Police will attend approximately 130,000 serious family violence and sexual assault incidents this year. And that was something that Lauren Calloway said when she was speaking at the grand opening of Impact for Women in Sandringham. 1 in 4 women will experience physical or sexual violence from a partner, boyfriend, date, or someone they know during their lifetime. For my people, the queer community, which is how I choose to title myself, that ratio is 1 in 3. Once assaulted, the survivor is 7 times more likely to be assaulted again. The majority of MARAMs, which I will actually probably leave to Maria to maybe speak about, which is an assessment regarding our risk, show a progression of escalation of the level of violence at each incident. The types of family abuse, and this is one of the things that's very important because we do need to define that it is not just physical, is controlling behaviour, emotional abuse, financial abuse, which sadly is predominantly with our elderly community when we talk about family violence. It is the most common. Psychological abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, visa abuse, which is growing. Over the last couple of years, the percentage of people required to be supported in refuge has gone to 29% for people who have only been in Australia for less than 10 years. And I'd fear that will actually get worse. Technology-based abuse is something that, to be honest with you, this occurred to me 5 years ago. I actually thought that it wasn't, I was paranoid, that it wasn't real. What it actually relates to is that we now have the tech support to actually put applications on people's phones, put tracking devices on cars. And unfortunately, some of the funding that is to support victims is now used for tech services to actually go over vehicles prior to people going into refuge, for new phone replacement, new computer replacement, and scanning apps that can actually protect people from that kind of stalking. Thank you. Family violence only happens in poor, uneducated or minority families. Family violence occurs among all types of families regardless of income, profession, religion, ethnicity, educational level or race. I will state though that in respect to the housing services that accommodate up to 116,000 people a year, they are generally lower socioeconomic. And sorry, I'll just move on from that. Thank you. The impact upon women's health. The single highest contributor to women's morbidity, disability, mental health issues, homelessness, unemployment, underemployment, and lack of education is family violence. Higher than smoking or obesity or heart disease. 3 out of every 10 hospital admissions are for family violence. Onset and escalation of family violence can occur during pregnancy. And that's a horrible statistic. Thank you. The impact upon children. 55% of child protection cases have a relationship to family violence. 30 to 50%, depending on which state's statistic I'm talking about, of all police attendants to family violence incidents, children were present in the home. Children exposed to family violence may present with emotional, physical and psychological trauma, struggle with learning difficulties, health issues, difficulty with aggression, behavioural and self-esteem issues and socialisation. They also have a higher likelihood of becoming an adult victim or a perpetrator. If a woman was in real danger, she would just leave. If she hasn't left, it can't be that bad. A woman is at her highest risk of extreme violence, including murder, when she does leave an abuser. So I've heard many people say, if he hit me, I'd be gone. That's it. So why didn't you just leave? Fear of not being believed, fear of reprisal, which we've just spoken about, the risk. I don't like using the term low self-esteem in respect to this because it's a forced view of yourself by an abuser. The shame and the guilt over it, belief that the abuse was deserved, which I most certainly did throughout my story. Lack of financial independence, desire to maintain family unit, and that includes, he's the father of my children. Isolation. Within people with disabilities or people who are elderly, the main perpetrator statistically is a family member and their carer. So that kind of vulnerability and that position to be in, I don't think any of us can really imagine how bad that would be. And also, of course, belief that there is only support for survivors of physical assault. Language barriers in respect to English being a second language, impairment of any kinds, lack of knowledge regarding support available, and that is also something that comes across everywhere in the ABS. Sorry, the Australian Bureau of Statistics reports upon this. We have a massive growing number of risks to visa or immigration status as being used as a threat. Thank you. Okay. Law and Order Special Victims Unit is my favourite TV show ever. I've seen every episode. In fact, I just look at this and I can tell you that's from season 2, and the lady with the orangey hair is about to leave, and Finn Tutuola is going to come in and take her place. Anyway, it's a brilliant TV series, but it's all fiction. They have statistically a 95% closure rate for sexual assault. And they also present that 55% of the people that would harm you are not known to you, they're strangers. Thank you. 6,164 sexual assaults were reported to Victoria Police in 2021. The Australian Bureau of Statistics estimates that approximately 24,656 sexual assaults went unreported, one every 20 minutes. And why does this reflect with family violence? because 80% of sexual assaults have a relationship to family violence. I honestly believe this is the one statistic I can say is completely wrong. I believe that if you are in that circumstance with the things that you are forced and coerced to do through duress, there is a high chance that that number is closer to 100%. 93% of victims are women and children. 75% of offenders were known to the victim. Thank you. I've used this statistic because there's a lot of feminist argument about an analogy that's out there that talks about rape versus robbery or car theft or having your wallet stolen. But the other reason is because it's truthful and it's scary. The conviction at an indictable level for burglary at Victoria's County Court is 80%. The conviction rate at an indictable level for rape at Victoria's County Court is 1.8%. That means 1 in 150 rapists will be convicted. Thank you. This is the most important part of what we need to do as a community. We need to break down the bias. The contributing factors to bias in respect to how the judicial system, how the community, how medical, mental health, all supports treat us is based on socioeconomic background, disability, alcohol and other drug issues, mental health issues, patriarchal legal system, lack of victim support through the court processes. 2 weeks ago, in a Melbourne community legal, which is a not-for-profit legal organisation, dealing with 50 to 80 supported clients per day in Magistrates Court for family violence intervention orders, has had to say, we are not taking any more clients. I don't know, I cannot believe that has happened. We need more money in the actual process of actually prosecuting and supporting people to have intervention orders relating to their children, to be able to have contact orders and consent orders relating to their children, property disputes. It's an absolutely horrible thing that this has occurred, and I hope that the government does change their mind about how they fund services such as that. I do know that Kathy has got a bit to do with some of the court staff and support, and I hope she speaks about it today. Community misinformation and media coverage, they're banged together. We will regularly hear, and with respect, and I hope they rest in peace, about Jill Maher or Eurydice Dixon, but they didn't know their perpetrators. They are the unusual. What we don't hear is about how often this happens with somebody you know. If you could tell me today that I didn't know my perpetrator, I could walk down that street anytime I wanted to. And just go, well, I'm not going to go down dark alleys. I'm not going to leave at 10 o'clock at night. I wasn't hurt after I went out to a pub or on a train or whatever. I was in my lounge room. Most dangerous place in my community is my lounge room. We need to strive for gender equality in every possible way so that we can actually stop gender violence. Thank you. The federal government has just brought out new funding. They are taking family violence seriously, but I wish they'd talk to us. And by us, I mean I wish they'd talk to survivors. And you'll understand when I actually talk about my personal story, but it's been consistently unpopular to do anything for the perpetrators. If we don't actually do something to assist them to change their behaviour, all we're doing is putting a band-aid on something that's going to continually get cut. It doesn't work at all. We need to also address, and this was a huge thing for me, and when I do tell my story, it'll explain that too, but in some parts of Victoria, the wait list for domestic violence counselling is up to 18 months, and the wait list for sexual assault counselling is up to 12. If we start viewing this as why didn't she leave, and then you list those reasons again, if you don't want someone to return, if you don't want them to see that there's no other option or another way of thinking, then you need to actually put support in place to actually repair that way. Thank you. What can you do? You're here today, you're already part of the solution. Listen without judgment. Offer information about 1-800-RESPECT or Safe Steps. Remember what I said, a lot of people don't know where to go, who to call. Don't give up. It might surprise you, but a survivor will leave an average of 7 times before permanently separating. Keep talking about family violence with your friends, family and community. Take the power out of the bias. Break the silence. Encourage and support the children and young people in your community to empower themselves and others. Get involved, volunteer, donate, time or coin. You could become a member of Impact for Women. It's actually a very, very small charge, less than a pizza, right? And they'll get you a year. Never underestimate a survivor. Advocate for our right to be included in our recovery. We have spent time being told our thoughts, feelings, ideas are worthless. It is not helpful in any manner for us to then go into services and have power taken away from our choice and control as well. Never underestimate yourself. Your support is the most powerful voice for change. And that absolutely, definitely applies to men in this room. Thank you for being here. And remember the 3 most important life-saving little words. I believe you. Okay, so one of the reasons why I needed to give you that before I speak about what happened to me is because I need to feel safe when I talk. And I need to feel that you'll have some understanding around the concepts I'm going to discuss without going into them at an academic level. Yeah? I will be including in this my contact with Impact. And just remind you, fantastic charity. Like I said, my name is Jenny, and thanks to the services that have supported me, this is my real name. My experience with Impact is so important to where I am today. My story is so familiar amongst survivors that although it's almost impossible to believe, it is the most normal representation of family violence in Australia today. I hope you stay with me throughout this and understand by reading and supporting Impact, you are part of the solution. Part of this document is supposed to also go onto a website. In 2017, after a short 8-month relationship, I was physically and sexually abused. I went into the care of Safe Steps. Safe Steps are an emergency and first point of contact organisation that help women and children escaping violence. A taxi with a family violence approved driver was sent to collect me. The driver was polite but refused to tell me where I was going. He wasn't allowed to do so. None of them are. I had been told by Safe Steps to turn off my phone. I was told I couldn't contact anyone, not even my adult sons. I arrived at a hotel approved by Safe Steps. The person behind the counter knew my name. It was so unnerving, and they handed me a red bag. Sorry. I went to the room and I locked the door. I latched the safety latch and I sat on the bed. I'd never felt more alone in my life. I looked at the bag, read the word Impact. I burst into tears when I opened it. Adult colouring book, face mask, makeup, perfume, all sorts of toiletries. The first moment I realised I hadn't had time to grab those when I left. And chocolate. Chocolate, can you believe it? And a note saying, "You are loved." This was the first moment of kindness I had experienced in as long as I could remember. My perpetrator was on county court bail at the time of offending towards me, and that was automatically revoked. He went to prison on the 16th of April 2017. Although he was later sentenced for other offences, he continued to re-offend towards me from prison every 6 months for the next 4 years and 10 days. I was moved 4 times He circumnavigated the prison mail rooms by addressing mail to my dog's name, sent people to my home with everything from jewellery to bath soaps, with none of the delivery people knowing that they were assisting a breach of a full family violence order. My perpetrator always alleged that police convinced me to make complaints, that I never knew my own mind. His letters were always 8 to 12 pages full of hate and control measures, constant reminders of how stupid I was, how much he loved me, how many people he knew, and how much I needed to behave. Those breaches occurred every 6 months after every new set of charges incurred. At first, a 1-year police family violence order, then a 5-year order, then finally an order for 60 years, far exceeding either of our natural lives. He paid no attention to any of them. He once told me that if you're prepared to accept the consequences, anything is possible. And he was, and he is. Sadly, our system only allowed for sentencing for breaches of 3 weeks to, at best, 4 months. Fortunately, the parole board were able to reject his applications based on the above and additional reoffending in prison. The board rejected his application on 3 occasions. During his sentencing, regardless of his reoffending, I returned to study and work. I volunteered with services that had helped me. Then one day, I saw the impact symbol on a friend's Facebook feed. I commented on what should be in the bags. Kathy Kaplan contacted me and shared the volunteer days at the former location in Glen Iris, and then at that school hall. Kathy sought me out at the 2018 Mother's Day pack. She checked on me, even though I didn't actually realise that's what she was doing. I couldn't stay the entire time. Seeing the thousands or so bags, and there are far more now, knowing how many of us are out there broke my heart and triggered me in ways I couldn't have imagined. At this time, my ability to understand impact was superficial. The bags of love were just a scratch on the surface. I moved onward and upward. I spent a large amount of time playing sport. Exercise was great, combatant for hypervigilant PTSD. I grew stronger through Taekwondo. I actually won a gold and a silver medal in 2019 in my age division. And most rewardingly through community sports, particularly the Big Issue women's soccer program, which I will love and adore for life and be grateful for, which allowed me to contribute to family violence awareness through speaking to university students, private girls' schools, particularly affluent ones, and my favourite was going to the women's prison. I finally went back to my original career as a disability officer in 2020. I could now afford to donate to Impact, and I wish this was the end of my relationship or my story. On the 25th of April 2021, my perpetrator was granted straight release. That term means full sentence served and no requirement to report to community corrections. He reoffended the same day. He was arrested on the 11th of May 2021. He was charged with sexual assault, theft, false imprisonment, a breach of an order and persistent breaching, which is now, thanks to legislation, an indictable offence. As a result, I spent time in hospital, then was released to safe steps. After 10 days in a hotel, I was sent to high-risk refuge. This was outside of Melbourne, an area I didn't know. I already knew the rules. No contact with anyone, lost my home, where I volunteered, my job, my friends, my family, my clothes, my washing basket, my colander, my hairdryer, my everything, and also my church. The material things may seem stupid, but they were my things. I was so low, so angry, so beaten down when I walked into Safer Futures case manager's on-site office. I had nothing to be positive or grateful for. Then I saw the storage shelving, massive wall of it, and it was full of red impact bags. A sea of red, and I knew I was safe now. I hope I still have your attention, but because I believe this is the most important of my or our story, and why Impact needs your support. New legislation now allows the survivor to know all parts of the harsh perpetrator's history that pertains to their safety. Case management informed me in June 2021 that my perpetrator had 31 years of corrections history at age 49, 13 years of prison sentencing for violent offences. Less than 12 months of that is for family violence. 29 affected family member orders. 9 protected persons orders, which included some men. This was the first time I heard undeniable evidence that this was not my fault, that I didn't deserve it, that I didn't do or say anything wrong. My perpetrator was a coward. He beat women. He used sexual violence against women. 5 years, I had thought it was just me. I was in refuge for 2.5 months until my perpetrator was denied bail and committed to trial. Whilst I was in refuge, I, along with a bunch of kids, made babushka dolls courtesy of Impact's Bags for Love. I was so grateful to Impact. Refuge is so boring, and also what an opportunity to feel humility through 6-year-olds mastering sewing while I fumbled the whole lot. Today I understand that love and care that the volunteers put into the Bags of Love changes our future but my admiration is that its truest form goes to the members of Impact committed to advocating for change, awareness and us. In May this year, I attended County Court committal hearing and gave evidence. A year had passed since the last offences and I had still not reached the top of a counselling waitlist for family violence or sexual assault. But Court Services, or Court Dogs Victoria, organised a chocolate Labrador called Lucy to sit with me throughout my testimony. At the end of that day, all the charges were sent to County Court. My sons supported me. My sons supported me through that. We had dinner that night and I felt for the first time in 5 years that this might be over. Our judicial system allows a perpetrator to apply for bail at each court level. The perpetrator applied for bail in July this year. COVID has contributed to the backlog of trials at county court level and juries have been unable to attend the courts. After 14 months on remand, legally at this point, an innocent person, judge had absolutely no choice but to grant him bail, adding strict conditions. He was to reside 200 kilometres from Melbourne in a hotel paid for by the Salvation Army, be at that hotel between the hours of 9 p.m. and 6 a.m, attend the local police station daily for sign-in, have contact with psychiatric and support services, fortnightly drug testing. He was also given the condition to return to court once a month here in Melbourne for judicial monitoring. The Office of Public Prosecutions obviously opposed this application but kept me informed every step of the process. When they let me know that he was granted bail, I replied, when he breaches, not if, when, please let me know as soon as you've got him returned to custody. The perpetrator lasted less than 6 weeks without breaching these orders, both the family violence order and the county court bail conditions. This triggered my return to safe steps. Security upgrades to my property to the point where it's comparable to Fort Knox. And as I had to leave my employment at that point, 18 days of lost earnings, equaling $6,000. 2.5 months have passed and the perpetrator has still not been returned to custody. Victoria Police simply do not have the resources to respond to the current family violence incidents and parole violators and bail jumpers. It is highly unlikely that I will ever get to be heard in county court, and a trial cannot proceed without the perpetrator present. I feel obligated to tell people parts of my life that are painful and intimate, because I'm actually hoping that something I say will hit home somewhere and this will change. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for sharing that with us. We hold your story with care and gentleness. Well, let's take a moment and have a breath and reflect on our own responses to that story and to the fact that it's an ongoing one. I'd like to invite Maria Gullaci now to come forward and to share her presentation.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Beautiful. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I do want to thank James for inviting me to your forum this morning. I want to say thank you, Jenny, for sharing your story, which is so important in this path and this journey that we're all on to just to make family violence in focus, and so that we can all have some strategies and abilities to support our adult survivors. So just a little bit about myself. I am Maria Gullaci. I am currently employed with Uniting in Dandenong. I've been in the community services sector for about 15 years, and I've held various roles from Women's Refuge, Child First, Family Services, and currently I have the pleasure of leading a family violence program where I manage a team of counsellors and case managers. I also want to, let's see if I can do this. I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here today. In family violence, we also want to acknowledge, bear with me. In family violence, we also want to acknowledge the terrible impact of family violence on individual families and communities, and the strength and resilience of women and children in their fight, in all of our fight, for safety, equality and government reforms. Okay, so I also want to start off to say that, and I know that we're going to hear this throughout today's forum, is that we need to acknowledge that family violence is gender-natured. Research acknowledges that family violence and domestic violence is in the context of current and ex-partners' intimate relationships, with the perpetrators being identified as the partner or men, and victims as women and children. I also want to recognise that there are men at times that have also been identified as family violence, impacted by family violence. We have recognised that this is a bit of a gap in the system, and I know that I'm really pleased with the programs that I run, that in case management we are starting to support men that are impacted. We also acknowledge that family violence occurs in same-sex relationship. However, research is also very clear that Australian women are 3 times more likely than men to be impacted of family violence. So I just want to just set the scene that for today's purposes, adult survivors will be referred to as women impacted by family violence, and the person who uses violence will relate to either current or ex-partners. Like James has said, what we need to be careful of today is that I want to acknowledge that the topic that we are speaking about today is of a sensitive nature, and you're probably going to hear these services quite a few times throughout the day. But please look after yourself. Please take some time to regroup if you need that. 1-800-RESPECT is a service that we hold dear, because that's a service that we know that women can, and or anyone actually can access 24-hour service. So if you need that service, please feel free to give them a call, or if you have a friend, reach out to them. Okay, so today what I'll be covering is what is family violence, indicators of family violence, responding to family violence, safety supports available, and later on we have the ability to, opportunity to ask questions. The approach that I'm going to take is to provide, hopefully, everyone here with some strategies if you are responding or supporting a woman, child, or male impacted by family violence. So hopefully you'll be taking away something that you can use in your everyday life. I also want to acknowledge that every child, woman, have the right to live free from family violence. They have the right to equality, and today this is why we are all here today. So, what is family violence? I think you're going to hear that. We're going to go through this a few times today. But I want to acknowledge that really the first step to responding to family violence in our work is to have a very good understanding of what family violence behaviour looks like. Thank you, James. And the Victorian Family Violence Act of 2008 is a very good place to start. So Family Violence Act identifies family violence as physical, emotional, sexual, and I'll just put this over here, psychological, financial, and coercive control. It acknowledges that the threatening or coercive behaviour dominates or controls another person in that family, that puts them in fear, and that takes away their safety and impacts their well-being. So basically, family violence, it's important to understand, is any pattern of behaviour that occurs over a period of time that places fear on a person and impacts on their safety and well-being. Another aspect of family violence is that is a behaviour that directly impacts a child. So whether the child hears what's going on, whether the child is present, whether they're there aiding the adult survivor through the incident, or sometimes even intervening, or even when police are present following an incident. So it's important to understand this is why we refer to it as domestic and family violence, because it's greater. There's multiple family members that are also impacted by family violence. Okay, what does family violence look like? So as we've seen through domestic violence, it has many different faces. And unfortunately, and this is a point that I still want to stress, that unfortunately within society and also within community, there still lies this belief that if it's not physical, it's not family violence. Because with the physical, we can see the visual effect. But when we talk about the emotional, psychological and verbal abuse, most times within community, you're not going to see that. But those forms of family violence are real, and we need to take note of them, and they are just as impacting as every other form of family violence. So within my many, as I said, within my many years of supporting women and children, it is not uncommon for me to hear from their experiences that their family violence experience has been minimised, not only by the person that uses violence, but also from family members and also from in community, because there was no physical family violence. And we need to just address that myth, and as we continue to support women and children, have that always at the back of our minds. Because if we don't do this, it leaves adult survivors feeling confused, not heard, and hesitant in seeking support. So in our work, when we are working with supporting adult survivors, it's important to, as I said, and I'm going to be stressing this point right throughout my presentation, it is important to understand the different controlling behaviours used against women is really paramount. So when we're talking about verbal abuse, it's anything that is used, like name calling, put downs, yelling, threats. You know, the threats look so different for every adult survivor. You know, a big one is, and this is probably the biggest lie, the persons that use violence can use that their children will be removed. They won't be removed. And that control actually stops women and children receiving the support or reaching out to get support. The emotional, psychological, this is where a lot of gaslighting behaviour occurs. It's that type of behaviour makes a woman feel like they're going crazy. They don't trust their own ability to make decisions because they've been told for such a long time, over a period of time, that what they're thinking and saying it doesn't matter, or it never even occurred. And that's why, I guess, in my experience, the stories that we hear, one of the elements why women feel that they won't be believed when they disclose their story. The other most important factor also I want to highlight is what we call coercive behaviour. And that is really any behaviour that controls a person's actions and thoughts. And that has so many different faces. And within coercive control is all those other family violence behaviours that we spoke about. Hopefully throughout this presentation, I'll give you some strategy, I'll give you some ideas what that coercive behaviour control looks like. So let's start with our indicators of family violence. I want to start off with just talking about common tactics that are used by a person who uses family violence. So one of the main themes that we hear when we're supporting adult survivors is that their partner, both current and ex-partner, has two personalities, which really leads them to be, it's confusing for them, it's exhausting. It's not uncommon to hear that behind closed doors, away from the public eye, that they present as cruel, demeaning and violent, but out in community, they are charming, they are well regarded, they are liked, and they have this completely different personality. Because of this particular factor, this is another factor that women or adult survivors find it really difficult to disclose their story because of the fear that they will not be believed. So the other factors is using intimidating behaviours such as glares or any type of body language that shows the woman that they need to step back and be quiet and not say anything. And that element is going to be different for so many different women. It's not uncommon, we hear of stories that even when women go to court, whether they're going through the intervention order process or family law court, and they are well prepared, and within our services we try to prepare them for court and manage different aspects that might happen to quiet them down. They will often say, Maria, sometimes it's just that look. Nobody else in that courtroom will know what that look is for, but I know what it means. And so we address that with the woman, and we try to build their resilience, their safety, their strategies to manage that court so they get the outcome that we know that they deserve. The other element is using a lot of blaming language or accusatory language throughout their relationship. And it could be about the state of the relationship, it could be about the state of the children, it could be why they're not reaching certain expectation, which are from a demand of the person who uses family violence. And the other thing, and you'll probably hear me say this a lot, it's making threats to harm the woman, children or family members. And that is a very common tactic that a person who uses violence to quieten women so they do not go and get support. I wanted to show you this because it's probably one of the major frameworks that we use in family violence. We call it the cycle of violence. It's also referred to as the cycle of abuse. And I think it's really important because this framework helps us to understand the recurring pattern of the behaviour that is occurring within that relationship that the woman is experiencing. It helps us to understand the pattern of control and the unpredictable behaviour that adult survivors face every day of their life and their children. It helps us to understand that the woman's experience or the adult survivor's experience is true, it is real, it is happening, it is occurring, and it's not just in their head. And it helps us to understand that the cycle or the pattern of behaviour can be as little as 2 days or over a few weeks. I'm not going to get into it too much, but I just wanted to present it so that you can go off after today's forum, do a little bit of research, so because in your support with supporting adult survivors, this framework is really important to understand. The fluctuation of behaviour causes the adult survivor to fear, to be anxious, to be confused as they move from the state of hope, so at the honeymoon stage where everything is quiet, everything is settled. The person who uses violence may show some remorse. A lot of women say to me over the course of their relationship that they very rarely have an apology. What they notice is in the honeymoon stage is that the person who uses violence just withdraws a little. As they move towards the tension stage, so this is where women say that they're feeling like they're walking on eggshells, that they can just, they sense that the tension is growing, and that's when they start, to feel like, what do I need to do now, and start to put their own safety plans in place to manage that. As they move towards the experiencing the tension and explosion, this is where women really feel that despair and say, oh no, this is where we're going through this again. Why did I trust, him again? And I find like, here we go again. And this is where our support together can certainly support women around safety. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more later on. What I want to say about the cycle of violence, what we have noticed and what research has shown is that there's two elements that influences, I guess, the cycle going around. One, which is that the person who uses violence actually deny their response, their behaviours. They won't take responsibility for their behaviours. They won't accept the fact that they're choosing to use violence. And the other thing is that the influences that women deny that family violence is going on. So not giving them having the opportunity to disclose what's going on. So I thought we'll start off in talking about indicators of family violence as we work together to tackle this problem within our community. I do want to say that through our services, family violence services, family violence services, and many of the services throughout our state, we are working together to build communities' insight and ability and confidence to support adult survivors and children experiencing family violence. Understanding the indicators is also a very good point to start in our journey. So indicators, so when you're speaking to women or to children, some of the indicators could be that they appear anxious about making decisions about themselves or their health. So they might say, no, I can't go to the doctors, or, oh no, I don't think I need to do that. Or it might be anything, but so that could be an indicator. Another indicator could be that they become upset or anxious when the partner is mentioned or anything about the relationship is mentioned. It could be that they're, and this is something that you are either citing yourself or that the woman is finding a little bit difficult to express, that partners embarrass them or criticise them, not only at home but also in public. Isolation, this is a big one. And isolation is what the indicators around that is. She might be saying that, you know, she doesn't have contact with her family anymore, or she might be saying that, you know, the person who uses violence won't allow me to have contact with my family. There's a lot of threats, so a lot of women, adult survivors and children are estranged from their family because the person who uses violence will actually make threats that if they have contact with their family, that may happen to them. And so they tend to keep themselves safe, to keep their family members safe. They actually withdraw from them at a point that we actually need them to be connected to their family and to their community. The other indicator to look for in this is if they're sharing things that, you know, as I said before, that their partner just doesn't want her to have contact with them. They may tell you that the partner pressures them into doing things that they don't want. And that's a huge thing, that women are adult survivors are always trying their best to manage the family violence, and which is at no fault of their own, and they're putting lots of different strategies, and you know, that's a big one, that they just, you know, their voice is not heard, or they don't have an equal say in that relationship. So just have, you know, that could be an indicator that they might be experiencing family violence. They might talk to you about that their partner is really jealous or can be angry or gets angry very quickly or possessive. And that could be whether they're spending too much time with their children. It could mean if they've gone out to meet with a friend. This is another factor why adult survivors can feel quite isolated, because it's not uncommon for me to hear stories when adult survivors want to go and meet up with their friends, that their partner or the person who uses violence makes it very, very difficult. Then they just give up at the end. I also want to talk about, within all, an indicator is what we would call stalking behaviour. Now, you might not see that as stalking behaviour, but some of the indicators could be that the partner is constantly calling them, or when you're speaking to an adult survivor, you've noticed that she's getting multiple texts. And we'll just talk about a little bit about that later on and how to respond to that. And another one is maybe watch out, like if the person who's using violence, does he present to her work uninspectedly, or is he making it difficult for her to continue with her work? So she might mention that she has limited or no access to money. She might be saying, you know, things like, I'm finding it really hard to pay for the bills, or I need to buy something for my child, but I don't have the money to do so. So it might be, so in terms of financial control, it could also be that she has to present receipts for everything she buys. And I know that might sound really, you know, strange for those of us, you know, for the majority of us, but for women or adult survivors, you know, that is very real for them. So, yeah. Other indicators could be that they say that they are afraid or they don't want to leave the children with their father. If you cite children, so you might have the adult survivor and the children, be aware of what the children's behaviours are like. You know, are the children anxious? Are the children staying close by to their mother? Do they look withdrawn? Do they display aggressive or challenging behaviours? Now that could be parenting, or it could be also an indicator that family violence might be occurring in that family home. And obviously this one is one that we can see. We observe this is the unexplained injuries such as bruises, broken bones, sprains, cuts, that the adult survivor finds it difficult to give an explanation for. That's because we can see it, we know that something is going on. So don't be afraid to, I guess, address it, and we'll talk about what that looks like. So we've gotten to the stage of responding to family violence. So in responding to family violence, I'm hoping that I can give you some strategies and tools that you can implement in your everyday life as you are wanting to support adult survivors. These are the main aspects that I use in my work, and I feel that they work. So I just want to share a little bit of those aspects with you today. So in the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about observation, active listening, validation, asking the relevant questions, sharing risk, and safety planning. So observation, while you're sitting with the adult survivor, take notice of her expressions, take notice of her body language. And within this, trust your instincts, trust what your instincts are telling you. And also don't be afraid to share your observation with the person that you're sitting with. So some of the things that you might be observing is, how is the woman dressed on that day? Is it appropriate for the weather? Is she wearing glasses? What's her voice doing? Is she shaky? Does she feel anxious when she's speaking about about the person who uses violence? As I was saying, does she present anxious or nervous or even scared? What is she doing with her hands? Is she clutching them? Is she fidgeting? Is she moving? These are all observations that something is not quite right with her, because the adult survivor, there's not that calm element about her. Her body language is telling you that something is going on for her. So when you are noticing some of these things, some of the questions that you may, relevant questions or good questions to ask could be things like, I noticed when you came in today that you appeared anxious and that you were looking over your shoulders. Is everything okay? I noticed that today is a warm day outside and you're wearing a jumper. Are you feeling okay today? Is there something going on for you? Or I've noticed that when we've been speaking about your partner today, that you were looking down and you were clutching your hands. Is there something going on for you? So don't be afraid to ask the questions or to share your observations, because that one question can open up the conversation for a woman to give you some understanding or indication what's going on for her and her family, in her life. The other one is active listening. And sometimes we're not good at this, because we want to jump in and just fix the problem. But just sit there with the adult survivor and listen to what the problem is without judgments. be attentive to what she's saying, and also be attentive to not only the words that she's saying, but also what she's not saying. What are the little gaps or the inconsistency in her story or exposure that you're wondering about? And that's really important to do, so that it helps us as we do this work to ask those relevant questions. So when you're active listening, what we're looking out for is, what is the adult survivor saying about the relationship? Does it seem strange to you? Does it sound inappropriate? Is there anything disrespectful in the language that she's using, that she's relaying, that is being said in that relationship? As I said before, one of the indicators, is she mentioning to you that she's constantly being put down or criticised, not only for her parenting, but for her abilities. So just be very mindful of that. This is something also you may observe yourself. Note that and don't dismiss it in our journey to support our adult survivors in getting the support. Has she mentioned to you in these conversations that there's threats to harm her, her children, or family members? Take note, listen to what, as I said before, what is she saying about the children? Is she making comments about her own mental health state, whether she's feeling crazy or whether in this relationship she's been made to feel like that? And also listen to whether she's expressing or worried about being late. I've really got to stop. I've really got to finish this meeting up right now because I've really got to get home because I've got to do A, B, and C. Now, it may be that she does have all those tasks that she wants to accomplish throughout the day, but it also may be that there's something, that she So relevant questions as you are sitting with the adult survivor could be, I noticed today when you spoke about your partner that you sounded afraid of him. Do you want to share more about that? I would like to go back to something you said earlier about the child, or about the partner, or about your family. Do you want to share more about that? You mentioned that that before you and your partner were in this relationship, that he was in another relationship, and he blamed that person for the relationship breakdown. Do you know whether there was an intervention order in place for that? Ask questions about the children. Can you tell me about the children? How are they going? Have you got any concerns about the children? How are they going at school? How are they going socially? Because through those questions, you can also gather what is going on for them in their family home, and what are the supports that they require. But if the take home today could be one thing, the most important question would be, do you feel safe right now? Is it safe for you to go home right now? You don't have to sit with this by yourself. Let's see if we can do something together. Validation, and Jenny mentions this before, believe the woman's story is so important, because for such a long time before they sought support, or before they even had the courage to share about their story, no one ever said that, no one ever mentioned to them that what they're experiencing is real. As I mentioned, this is a very important aspect of supporting anyone impacted by family violence. Communicating to the adult survivor that what is happening to them is real, it's not their fault, nothing they could do could have changed that they are worthy of support can be such relief, because finally someone is actually hearing them, finally someone is believing their story. So with validation, we're letting the adult survivor know that her experience is not just in her head. That her experience is not just in her head, that is actually occurring. Validation reminds her that nothing that she could have done to change the situation or to prevent her partner's behaviour. Validation reminds her that she did not contribute to the abuse, that she's not responsible for the abuse, and that the person who uses violence has made a choice. And it's there, and it's a choice. Validation reassures a woman that we believe her story. And I want to stress this point, and that her and her children are worthy and deserving of safety, health, and equality. And no one has the right to hurt them, no matter how angry anyone gets. So relevant questions around this could be, how are things at home? Or other relevant questions could be, what are the stresses at home for you? How does your partner respond to stresses? Has your partner ever hurt you or the children? When was the last time an incident occurred, or when was the last time there was stresses and your partner became angry? Have you ever reported the incidents to police? Have you ever had an intervention order in place against your partner or person who uses violence? And relevant questions always around, have they ever been linked in with services, or do they have the contact details of services? Sharing the risk, this is so important. No one person, when supporting adult survivors and children around family violence, can we share the risk on our own. We are a community. This is a church community, and so the most important thing is that if risk has been disclosed, always inform someone in leadership about what's going on. Be honest with the woman about your concerns and your responsibility to address these safety concerns. So don't keep risk to yourself. Share it. Share it with your leadership. Share your concerns so that there is a holistic approach towards supporting the adult survivor. As I was saying, be honest with women and children about your concerns and your responsibility to address these concerns. Never promise exclusive confidentiality, because in this line of work, when we are supporting adult survivors and the risk concerns, we do need a holistic approach to ensure that they are safe, and also adhere to legislative reporting requirements. And if you do have risk concerns for women and children, if you're able and they want your support, assist them to call child protection in regards to the concerned needs of their children, and also to report to police, or if you go to court, or help them to get informed about what services and support are out there for them. Safety planning. I think this is an area, certainly in my line of work, we are always working in the elements of addressing risk management and safety planning. Now, this is not everything, and safety planning is individual for the adult survivor's experience. But in safety planning, the most important thing is that in a crisis, always call police on 000. Within our programs, we use an ARC app. You can get it from the either Apple Store or whatever phone you're using. It is located at the App Store. And this is a really good app for women to start diarising their family violence experiences. So when they go to court, or if they want an intervention order, they're starting to collect their evidence so that it helps them to get those documentation. Help them to understand that if they're still in the relationship, where are the exit points in their home? We try to say that not to get themselves in between the person who uses violence and the exit points. We encourage women and children to practice their getting out safety plan if they need that. We can share with women to stay away from rooms that have weapons, such as the kitchen, or stay away from bathrooms where they can get locked into the home. It's so important that for the adult survivor that there are supports surrounding her. So it could be a neighbour, it could be a trusted friend, it could be anyone, a trusted person within community. We talk about setting up either a code word or an emoji to their friends, so that if police need to be called straight away, that code word or that emoji says to the family member or to this trusted person that the police need to be called straight away. If they need to go to court for an intervention order, you can redirect them to the court, and there's a court registrar who could support the adult survivor through that process. There is also the online ability to start your process of obtaining an intervention order. Our hope in the line of work is that when police are called to family violence incidences, that they're making the call that women need immediate safety response, and that they are given what we call a safety notice, or it's an interim family violence order that excludes the person who uses violence from the family home. We can support women if they are still in the relationship to pack a bag with clothing, with all their documentation. I remember when I was working in Women's Refuge that women would sometimes come without their documents, and we need those documents to set off Centrelink payments and accessing financial support. Sorry, I got to start. Yes, I do have to. I haven't got the other one. Sorry, thank you. If they're separated, encourage them to keep their doors and windows locked at all times. If they have intervention orders in place and they need their locks changed, so that there is funding for them to do that, and they can either go to their real estate agent and action that, or they can call support services who will also support them through that. Women, adult survivors can also have access to a safe phone. So what we find sometimes is that when they're ready to call police, that the person who uses family violence will snatch the phone off them and break the phone. So sometimes having a safe phone safely and securely in a secure place, it can be beneficial to assist and support their safety. And also a holistic approach, let safe people know what's going on, have schools involved in the safety plan, and trusted friends. So this is not an extensive list, but it's just some of the aspects of safety planning that we know can support women who are either in the relationship or post separation. So I noticed that we've also already spoke about this, so this is also very important because we want to support adult survivors in a non-judgmental way, and it's not always easy for women to leave the abusive relationship. This is not all the aspects of why women, the barriers, and these are, and I like to use barriers, not why women don't leave, but the barriers and And these barriers are really real, and we did speak about them before, but I just want to quickly go over them again, is that financial instability, fear that the children will be removed from them. They might have pets, they might have children with disability, that it's not going to be that easy for them to leave. Isolation, as we said, family violence. The adult survivor is from many different socio-economic backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds. And so, if they leave, they may be, a barrier is that they may be isolated from their friends, family, religion and community. And that's a really strong barrier and fear for adult survivors. Housing, we know that housing issues at the moment is huge. Rehousing victim survivors or adult survivors, it can be difficult. Lack of support, fear of the unknown. This is huge, how to make decisions on their own, because that capacity has been taken away from them. Their values and belief systems around what a family looks like, lack of confidence, hope, always hope. Remember, we talked about the cycle of abuse. There is, when they're at the honeymoon stage, there's always that hope that the partner would change. And visa status, these are only to name a few. So just to keep that in mind, that these barriers for women are quite real. Okay, support services. So I don't know if you're aware, but throughout the state, and this is one of the recommendations from the Royal Commission, which has been now actioned, is the Orange Door. So the Orange Door is the centralised intake and assessment point for anyone impacted by family violence, and so family violence, parenting, men's services. So this is the one in your local area, but there's an Orange Door in throughout the state. 1-800-RESPECT. We have heard this number throughout. This is such an important number for women impacted by family violence and sexual assault. It's a 24-hour service, and it's there. And we encourage adult survivors to make contact. An adult survivor recently shared with me that there was a family violence incident. She had called the police, and unfortunately, as we know, that the police system is under a lot of strain and pressure. The response time wasn't what we would expect. Under the circumstances, she was able then to liaise with 1-800-RESPECT, who then came on board and helped the crisis response. For children, there's Kids Helpline. Don't underestimate our children impacted by family violence do need support. And I know that schools, if we get them involved, there are some really good support. Some schools are better than others. So sometimes your advocacy around adult survivors and children getting support is so important. Just going along with someone to either a school meeting or Centrelink or police is so important. Ask Someone is a very good website for anyone who wants to build understanding. There's also Safe and Equal, that is a good website to build your confidence and understanding responding to family violence, and then local magistrates and courts. So Safe Steps, we heard about Safe Steps today as another support in supporting women. So that is me. So I hope that what I've shared this morning has been informative for you. My hope is that something I've shared today you can take home with you and take it along your journey as we support adult survivors and children in reducing the impact and behaviours of family violence. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria, for your talk. And I was going to invite some questions.
So if I can, Jenny, I just wanted to get a little bit of clarification. Something caught my attention when you were talking about your perpetrator. And when they came out of prison, you mentioned that they were funded by the Salvation Army, I think, to be in a hotel. Is that correct?
Sorry, it has to come back.
I'm going to get some extra slides.
That's it, get your step down.
Okay. Okay, one is, yes, the Salvation, okay, prison, what actually occurred was the perpetrator actually asked to be released to an address, a person, a friend. The judge and police, of course, check these addresses out. The person they'd requested to be released to was a previous AFM. So the judge gave the court system and corrections and the prison system 5 days to find alternative accommodation. And they found the Salvation Army. It is extremely important that we do everything we possibly can to ensure that a perpetrator, whether they're removed because there's just an order or whether they're released on bail or parole, that they're accommodated properly. Because where do you think they're going to go if they haven't got somewhere to sleep? Thanks.
Yeah. Completely understand that, and I'm for supporting people through rehabilitation as well, but I guess that caught my attention just because with the work that I've done previously, obviously, I'm sure other people are aware, there's a lot of homeless people who need accommodation as well, and so there's a fine line between, obviously, and I take your point completely with, obviously they do need somewhere to reside, otherwise, as you said, they'll end up in the wrong place. But yeah, I can't help think of others that are needing accommodation as well. So it is a very fine line and a hard place.
Absolutely, you're totally on board. And honestly, one of the biggest problems we've got with explaining to the community regarding funding is quite simply, it is not the popular vote to give offenders or perpetrators money or any kind of support. But without trying to be really simplistic about it, be kind to the unkind because they need it the most. And who do you think, how are they going to react? We need to give these people a chance to change, and they deserve it because we deserve it.
Just sitting and listening here this morning has brought up or reminded me of two problems, of which I don't know what the solutions are. The first one is that a very, very close friend of mine who died about 3 years ago, one of the things he did after he'd retired from his work was to set up and be part of running groups that supported men who had been convicted of violence. Now, and that was fantastic. My problem is that he was absolutely, totally convinced, and I've got no reason to think that he's wrong, was that the successes that they had required that the committers of the violence wanted to change themselves. And that leaves a gap.
Okay. I'm going to give you an example of what happened to me. One of the things that happened when I was in refuge is that an amazing woman who I cannot name because she still works in refuges, she was my case manager. The first time she saw my perpetrator's history with 29 other people, all those years, she said, "I read this, Jenny," and I cried. And I went, "Oh, I'm okay." And she went, "For him." I had never been more angry in my life until she explained it. He'd been offending since he was 18. He was 49 years old. He had never, ever been given the possibility or ability to change. Whatever was human in that man died 20 years ago. If there'd been an early intervention or a program within the prison system, or even a program within community corrections to work through this, a psychologist, anything, if you'd fixed him back then, I wouldn't have to stand here. And I wouldn't have to talk about 29 other people that can't stand here because they don't want to talk yet. So, yeah, maybe, yes, there's a lot to do with whether it's the willingness to change, it's a willingness not to want to be that way. But if you've gone so far down that track and he'd become institutional, it's impossible. There is absolutely no program in my mind that will change him now. But maybe if there'd been more funding for your friend's program, maybe if they'd been able to intervene in early 20s for these people, maybe we wouldn't be here today.
Yeah. Well, in fact, my friend didn't do any one-to-one stuff. It was all group things, and the way he ran it was that to get the members of the group to convince each other that they needed to change. And that was where they had the success.
Yeah, peer support's a fantastic idea. It's a really good idea.
Yeah. So that was just one thing, but they weren't 100%. They were only about 50% successful. And that's still a lot of people.
Yeah, it is, especially when you think about how the knock-on effect can go. Yeah, that's brilliant.
But they used to get people referred to them from the courts. But that's another story. The other problem is that my wife has a friend who has gone down a track of ticking a lot of the boxes which we've seen put up today, and yet certainly as far as my wife and I are concerned, when we see her and talk to her, we have no real inclination of whether any abuse is occurring or not. Or whether she is mentally unwell. And that's what we suspect is the case. She has been committed by a psychiatrist, but was sent home from the hospital after about 3 or 4 weeks. So it's a question of, is she sick or is she not? Or is she in a situation which is appalling? And we can't tell.
Okay. I'm going to tell you pretty much exactly how I feel, and I know Kathy feels. There are a lot of things that come to do with bias, and what you're talking about sort of skirts on that. Biggest reason that women don't actually get seen and heard, like the top reasons: mental health, disability, English as a second language, so migrants, and alcohol and other drug issues. Victoria Police do not care whether you inject drugs into your eyeballs. You don't deserve to be hit, you don't deserve to be treated that way. If there is somebody who has got a mental health illness, I can guarantee you the perpetrator is using that against them. And they also use it if they've got an even further coercive control. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not qualified, actually I don't know whether anyone in this room is qualified to judge whether someone has a mental illness, whether they have a psychiatric condition. But what I do know is it's irrelevant. If you think there's abuse in play, I can guarantee the only thing that is going to happen if there is a mental health issue or a psychiatric issue is the chances are it's far more likely they are more at risk. What I would strongly suggest you do is 1-800-RESPECT is actually for anyone. So you can call and say, I've got a friend and this is what's going on, what should I do next? I'm not qualified to tell you what to do next in that circumstance. These people are actually ready and willing and able to talk to you anytime you want. They're lovely and they want to help. So if you want, or your wife wants to speak to them, they will tell you how to move forward for your friend. And I'm really grateful that you've noticed, because one of the other things is a lot of people, they think it's a family matter, they don't think it's any of their business, or they think somebody else is in place helping, and that's not necessarily the case.
Our final speaker today is Kathy Kaplan, who is the founder and president of Impact for Women, and I'm sure that Kathy can describe for you far better what the work of Impact for Women is than I can.
Look, firstly, I want to thank St Luke's for inviting me here today and for having this important forum, and to thank those of you who are here and on Zoom for attending. It's not a comfortable conversation, and I understand that, but it's a really important conversation. What we've been talking about is the pandemic that we've had for millennia before any of us knew the word pandemic. As a church group, You'll be familiar with some of the stories that I'm familiar with through my faith tradition. You'd call it the Old Testament, I call it the Torah. And we know that family violence goes right back to the very earliest stories, with Cain killing Abel, then with the behaviours of Abraham and Sarah. But we also know now historically, before biblical times, family violence also existed. We have Hammurabi's stele, which is a big monument that was in Mesopotamia. And he was a bit of a tyrant, but he was also a bit of a megalomaniac. And he wanted to make sure that everybody remembered him for the rest of history. So he had 500 and something laws, 217 of which related to family violence. And where I say that he wanted to be remembered forever was at the end it said, if anybody disfaces this or anything, awful, terrible things will happen to them. The problem with his 217 laws, what was good about them was it was recognising that family violence existed even then. What from our perspective, really bad, was basically was saying, just don't hit us so it leaves bruises. So we've recognised that it's always been around. Now that actually makes me feel really despondent at times and think, well, what are we going to do about it? But you've mentioned something that's really important. People who perpetrate family violence, or people who perpetrate violence of any sort, it is a conscious choice. And you'll hear me reviewing some of the things we've already heard today, and I'll say it again later, but when we say, oh, it's the drugs, or it's the stress, or it's anger management, or they were drunk, they might be contributory factors, they're not causal factors, because a drunk person who perpetrates family violence doesn't go perpetrating violence on anybody else. Somebody who's under immense stress doesn't beat up on his colleagues or workers or employers, reserves that privilege for the person they say they love the most. So I think violence is always a choice. So in fact, I define family and domestic violence as an equal opportunity destroyer. It doesn't care what religion or culture you come from, doesn't care if you're educated or not, doesn't care if you're employed or not, doesn't care what socioeconomic group you're from, doesn't care if you're drunk, drugged or sober. It can and it does affect families of all shapes, all sizes, right round the world. Before I go further, I really do want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and waters that we're privileged to live and work on, and to extend my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and to any First Nations people listening today. So what causes violence? What causes domestic violence in particular, but any violence actually? And I think it comes down to the strongest geometrical shape that exists, a triangle. Those of you who are mathematicians or engineers know that a triangle is the most solid shape you can have. That's why bridges have all these triangles in them. And I think it comes down to one person or one country wanting to have power and control over another person or country and having disrespect. Now, we're in a faith community here, and you've all probably heard people say, I don't believe in religion, religion's the cause of all the world's evils, right? I don't believe that. I think religion is the excuse that people use. So if we look at Putin, he wants to have power and control and has disrespect for the Ukrainians. And that's what happens in families too, and organisations, wherever there is abuse or violence. And I tend to separate those out a little bit because most people think of violence as just the physical. But as Rosie pointed out to us, it's not. There are so many other aspects. We need to teach our children from this big about being respectful to all human beings, to give respect and to receive respect. And if we see each other as equals, each of us made in God's image, then we will not need to have power, not need to want to have power and control over others. And then is what I would call the Messianic era has arrived. So, as I said, most people think about family abuse and violence as the hitting, the kicking, the burning, the cutting, and eventually death. But as we've heard, it covers all sorts of other realms. And we've heard about most of those. I'll point out one that didn't. If you look at the top right-hand corner with the religious symbols, religious abuse is very common. It's where somebody prevents their partner or their family member from performing the religious acts they would like to, or conversely, forcing them to perform religious acts that they don't want to. So it's another form of abuse. We've talked about elder abuse. We've talked about child abuse. And in fact, if a child witnesses or hears family abuse, that is now considered child abuse legally. Pet abuse, we haven't mentioned that, but it's a very, very common one. 85% of the women who do report family violence report that there's been actual or threatened pet abuse. And it's another barrier, and I like that word barrier instead of reason. It's another barrier that stops us from leaving because our beloved dog will be killed, or that's what we're told, if we do. So there's all sorts of, we've talked about financial abuse, the sexual abuse, we've talked about isolation, and you can see COVID there. That's a new form of abuse that we've witnessed over the last couple of years, where perpetrators, especially in the early part of it when we were all in isolation, saying, okay, you're going shopping, but you're only going to go to that shop because I know there's a lot of people in there, and you're only going to go there during this time and this time because I want you to catch COVID. Or I will go during those times so I can bring COVID back to you. Another form of power and control over a human being. There was something else I just thought of that now has left my mind, I'm sorry, related to what we've been talking about, but you can see there are many reproductive abuse. Forcing someone to have an abortion that they don't want, or preventing someone from having one that they do. Or, do you know what the word stealthing is? Okay, it's a new form of abuse in the recent years where a man deliberately withdraws the condom or deliberately pricks holes in the condom prior to intercourse, either to impregnate the woman or to transfer a sexually transmittable disease. Can you see how, what's thinking? It's about power and control and disrespect. And these are just some of the ways that it's enacted. Of course, we don't fall in love with someone and then the next day get hit. Do you know the story about the frog and the hot water? Yeah. Some of you do, some don't. Okay, the story is, so it's an awful story. If you put a frog in a pot of hot, cold water and slowly bring it up to the boil, it won't notice. If you throw a frog into a pot of boiling water, it will scream and shout and kick and jump out. Family abuse is like the frog in the cold water. Now, actually, scientifically, that's untrue, but let's not let the facts affect a good story, okay? So when we fall in love, the forms of control are subtle. I think you mentioned about handing over receipts. That was the case in my marriage. $20 housekeeping a week, and I had to provide a receipt for every cent. And the first time I got hit was when I had dared to have a cup of coffee. It took me nearly 30 years, till only a couple of years ago, for me to decide that if I want to have a cup of coffee with a friend and I've got the money for it, then I can, it's my decision. So, and the forms of abuse build up, and it's very subtle, and you don't notice. You don't even always notice when you're being hit, and you don't always recognise that as abuse. In fact, when I was in court the very first time, I was, just before we went into court, we met with the barrister, and my mother was in the room. Now, I have to give you background. I was hit once as a child, and I know exactly what I got the smack for. I was in grade 6, Anna Dubaris was playing at our house, and I thought she'd overstayed her welcome, so I told her to go home. I've never been rude to another visitor again. So I was not raised with smacking as a normal behaviour. You know, the worst thing my mother used to do was, she called me Katka, Katka. What you did disappointed me. And for me, that was awful, just awful. But when I was hit by my husband, it then became frequent, and he convinced me that it was my fault, it was for my good, and that he was disciplining me. And that was so ingrained in my mind that when the barrister said to me, "Did he ever hit you?" And I said, "Of course, my mother nearly fell off the chair, she didn't know." None of us brag about being abused. And that's why, if we go back to what Rosie was saying, when you notice different behaviours in your friends, ask what's going on. It may not be abuse, it may be that they're not feeling well, could be that they're crabby, maybe that something else is going on in their family, but notice subtle changes in your friends. That's what friendship is about noticing subtle changes and responding to them and caring. And then also picking up on something you both said, if somebody does disclose something terrible to you, an adult or a child, I believe the first 3 words out of your mouth should be, "I believe you," followed by, "I'm here for you." It's up to us. Very few women and children lie about family, domestic, or sexual abuse. It's better to believe them till it's disproven rather than disbelieve them and then 6 months down the track find out it was all true. So, in the worst instance, of course, comes death. And in Australia, we lose 1 woman a week to murder. 1 woman a week. Almost all domestic violence. Now, these statistics I'm about to put up are accurate as of yesterday. As of yesterday, 95 Australian men have been allegedly murdered or manslaughtered. 2 of them family violence. 47 Australian women have been allegedly murdered or manslaughtered. 43 of them family violence. 36 children allegedly murdered or manslaughtered. 32 of them family violence. So you can see how previous speakers, this is not a gender problem, but it's a gendered problem. And that's why today especially, do you know what today is? It's International Men's Day. So the men who are here, I specifically want to congratulate you, because it's the good men in society, and there are far more of you than not. It's actually your problem to step up and help us to eradicate what I call a plague, a pandemic. So let me tell you a story, an origin story. Back in 2006, I'll go back earlier. I've been a single mum since my children were 5, 3 and 8 weeks old. And by the time we got to 2006, I was working, back in 2006, my children were almost teenagers or just teenagers. I was working very full-time to support them as a single mum, and I was the president of a very large communal organisation. Now, if you've ever been on a committee or in management, professionally or volunteer-wise, can you just raise your hand? Should be everybody, I would imagine. You all know it only takes you 5 minutes a week to run any organisation, right? So when my term as president came to an end, I had 5 spare minutes up my sleeve every week. Now, it was coming up to Mother's Day, and in 2006, that's really pre-social media. So we got all our news from billboards, TVs, magazines, radio. And of course, with Mother's Day, we're getting all these advertisements of happy mummies getting electrical appliances and chocolates that we neither need nor want. Right. And I thought, you know, there'd be an awful lot of us who don't even get that. But worse still, all of this positive advertising is actually having a negative effect on us because we've been brainwashed into believing that not only are we unlovable, but we are worthless. We're a waste of space on this earth. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could give these women a token gift that just for one moment they think, oh my goodness, a total stranger thinks I'm worth recognising on Mother's Day. So I did some research. I did some pathetic research, as it turns out, and I thought that there were 100 Victorian women in hiding because of domestic violence on any given night. And I thought 100 was a disgraceful number, and it is. So 12 friends and I got together and we packed 100 little gift boxes, smaller than a shoebox. We got them off to the couple of refuges I knew about, chip chop, job done. Move on to the next thing, Kathy. And then the thank you note started. And the one that still kicks me in my belly is the one that told me this was the first Mother's Day gift she had ever received that did not include a black eye. That did not include a black eye. And so Impact was born. It was never a conscious effort. It was supposed to be a once-off nice little thing that we did. So some more friends started joining in, our numbers started growing, we grew like Topsy. Our mission is to provide women and children hope when they're escaping extreme violence at home. By providing gifts and services with dignity, our recipients can envision the possibility of a healthier and safer future. And by doing so, I think we're creating a more caring and compassionate society by delivering programs that are practical, grassroots, and common sense. So let me tell you a little bit about how we've grown. So back in 2006, as I told you, we had 12 friends and 100 small gift boxes. Fast forward to this past financial year. Jenny talked about red bags. That's the red bag. It's heavy. Nothing in it is pre-loved. Everything is new. It contains basic hygiene things, shampoo, conditioner, brush, comb, toothbrush, toothpaste. When women leave, they usually leave with what they're wearing and their children by the hands. So I want you to take a moment to reflect for a minute. If you leave this church today just with what you have, you can't use your phone and you're not going to be able to go home for 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years or forever. What would you miss most? What is it that you don't have on your physical being now that you would miss? And then you're starting to approximate what the women who are fleeing extreme violence are feeling and missing. You've got nothing. How many of you have got lots of cash on you? Exactly. If you've got a credit card, are you the primary credit card holder? If you're not, you can't use your credit card because the bill will go home and your perpetrator, by looking at that, can sort of work out which region you're living in. So you've got no money. And this affects people of all socioeconomic groups. We know that a large number are from the lower socioeconomic groups, but not only. And in fact, the women who come from more privileged backgrounds actually struggle more because they've never had to have coping mechanisms. We have a woman in hiding at the moment whose perpetrator is a judge. It can affect any family. Women are primarily the majority, as you saw by the death numbers alone, the victims. Men, statistically, are the perpetrators, but this is not about men hating, because International Men's Day, a lot of good guys out there, okay? Men can also become victims, usually not of extreme physical violence. usually some of the other forms of abuse that we talked about, which is also unforgivable. But they're not tending to be in such mortal physical danger as women are. Happens in same-sex relationships. You've got younger abuse, you've got elder abuse. It happens in all family structures. And what I tend to say to people is, you might say, I don't know anyone. I'm sorry, I don't believe you. You don't know that you don't know anyone. When I gave my first talk about 15 years ago, it was to a Rotary group. And at the end of my talk, this guy stood up and said, I think all your statistics are expletive. And I thought, okay, how do I answer that politely? So I said, do you know anyone who's directly or indirectly affected by breast cancer? And he said, yes, of course I do. I said, if you know 1 in 9, you know 1 in 3. You just don't know that you know, because we don't go around bragging about it. To that man's credit, he looked at me and said, I think I should shut up and sit down. I just said, thank you. So we've moved up to just short of last financial year, just short of 2,000 volunteers who gave us 5,500 of volunteer hours, and we packed 4,000 of these red bags. This Christmas, we're packing, so we do 2 main deliveries a year, Mother's Day and Christmas. We're just coming up to finalising for our Christmas delivery. We're preparing 2,500 bags. So next financial year, if you hear me give this talk, it'll be at least 5,000 bags of love. But that's not all we do. We give, you know those big stripy bags you can buy? Yeah. We gave away probably 400 and something of those that contained everything new, linen, clothes, shoes, household products, children and teen gifts. And they go to the agencies for the caseworkers to distribute on an as-needs basis. So we don't work directly with the women concerned, we work through the agencies. And there's a reason for that. We're not professionals, we're just people who care. And it also helps with the transparency and accountability. So I'm very well known in my community, and I will get frequent phone calls. My friend has blah, 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 sad story. Can you give her a bag of love? And I have to say no. We give it through the agencies because that covers the transparency and the accountability situation. So we're working now with 41 different agencies around Victoria. Almost every time we do a delivery, another agency hears about us, puts up their hand and says, Kathy, can you help us too? I say, yes, of course. My treasurer and warehouse manager says, how? And I say, I don't care, just work it out, and he does. That's Alan. Yeah. And he does, he's amazing. Okay, what did we, through this Bags of Love program alone, give Victoria last year? That's a lot of money. You know, and that's just volunteers, just people like you and me, people who care. People who can give some dollars, people who can give some gifts, people who can give some time. Comes down to people who care. But that's not all we do. We also give interest-free loans. I did not check my watch when I started. I have no idea how long I've been boring you. Okay. Wave your arms frantically when I need to wrap up, all right? Thank you. So this started a number of years ago, around about 14 or 15 years ago, and I was at school working, and I received a phone call from Wendy. Wendy at the time was in charge of Brenda House, which was not far from here, and it's now been incorporated into Safe Futures. And she said, Kathy, I've got a problem. I've got a family, 5 children, eldest is 15, and they've been in and out of refuge pretty much all their lives. So far, typical story. Mum just died. This 15-year-old has organised Mum's funeral. It's set for tomorrow. The undertaker won't release Mum's body because the children don't have $6,000, which was the cheapest funeral on the books at the time. Can you help? Well, we didn't have $6,000. I didn't have $6,000. I'll never have $6,000. But as it so happens, the previous weekend in my school role, I'd been chatting to one of the school's philanthropists, and at the end of our meeting, he said, Kathy, what's this impact thing that I'm hearing about? So I told him. I then said to Wendy, give me 30 minutes and I will call you back to tell you if I can help you or can't help you so you know where you stand. I rang Mr. Philanthropist. I told him the story and said, can you help? And he came up with a brilliant idea. He said, I'm going to deposit $10,000 in Impact's bank account. You are to use it for interest-free loans, was his idea. We gave the children the $6,000. They could bury mum with respect the next day. And these children started paying us back $20 a month. After a couple of months, I said to Alan, this 15-year-old has more responsibility than many 30-year-olds I know. Can we forgive the loan? Good idea, says Alan. Calls me back the next day and says, I can't, they've moved, I don't know where they are. And I thought, oh, that's a bummer. The next day he rang me and said, I've got an idea. I'm going to close our bank account, so when they put $20 in, it'll bounce back to them and we'll open a new bank account. And that's what we did. So, you know, we're nothing if not practical and creative. So how it works since then, and fortunately now because banks and other organisations are offering this service, we're not called upon so often. If an agency had a real need for something and couldn't find the funding elsewhere, they would ring me. I don't need to know the woman's name. In fact, I know none of the women's names. I need to know the story. I do what I do best, I cry. I call Alan, who doesn't cry nearly as easily as I do, and say to him, can we help? Have we got the funds to help? Fortunately, we've always been able to. So then I give him the agency's name, the agency acting on behalf of the woman, and Alan acting on behalf of Impact, write a contract that we're giving the woman X dollars for this purpose. So some of the purposes we've done is reconstructive jaw surgery after having had her jaw and face broken in many places. We've given money to a woman whose perpetrator gave her the car but no car keys, power and control. Here's another power in my own personal life. When my husband was leaving and he was moving overseas, he was taking everything out of the house, including the Kenwood his parents gave us for our wedding present. I don't think he knows what a Kenwood is used for, but he took it too. And I asked him, could he leave me the hammer? It's the only tool I know how to use. And he did. He left me the hammer. He took the handle, but he left me the hammer. Power and control. Can you see how insidious it is? And how it really gets it undermines everything about who you are to yourself. So we've done that, and I've got another story, if we've got time and you're interested, that you'll need a tissue for with the interest-free loan. So Alan they write a contract, and then the money starts coming back as the women are able to in a drip feed. And we made a philosophical decision that if somebody wasn't paying us back, we were never going to chase it. We've made the decision that how we're going to view this is this woman had a real need. We had the capacity to help her. We made an impact. She can't pay off. Let's move on and do the next good thing we can. And we're really proud of that. About 60% are paying us back, some $20 a month, some $50 a month, some $20 every 6 months. But we've helped, and it's really, really important to us. And we've given bursaries to the different agencies. Last Christmas, for example, we helped one refuge that looks after Indigenous women to send the children on a 2-week camp to have a bit of a break and a holiday, and done things like that. We've also, and this is really important, offering a court childcare program. We have fantastic relationships with the police. They were located at Moorabbin Police Station. They've now moved to Sandringham, which is actually really good for us because they're 6 minutes away from our warehouse. And they come and volunteer on a regular basis and help us. some in uniform, some not in uniform. I love having them come in uniform because it creates it's good PR for them. And some of our volunteers are survivors like Jenny, and they don't always have a positive relationship with the police. So being in that relaxed thing, it breaks down barriers and it's wonderful. The disadvantage of the police coming in uniform is they don't actually get to do a lot of work because everyone wants to have a selfie with them. But that's fine too. So anyway, pre-COVID, it seems like forever ago, doesn't it? Alan and I and a couple of our board members took out 20 of our police friends for coffee, just as a thank you. And you know, when you're in a group of 20 or more people, you hear a snippet of this conversation, a snippet of that. Well, I heard Bernie, who was the inspector at the time, and he was in the back corner, say something about no childcare in courts on family violence days. And I thought, I really should have put in my hearing aids. I must have misheard. I said, beg your pardon? He said it again. I said, what do you mean there is no childcare in courts on family violence days? It isn't, that's the way it is. And I said, well, that's not the way it's going to stay. So practical, common sense, grassroots. So I got Bernie and said, you're going to take me to Moorabbin Court and introduce me to the senior magistrate, which is what we did. And we put to her that we thought this was an unconscionable decision and we wanted to do something about it. Now, Moorabbin Court, to put background, right, when a woman goes into refuge, she's taken to another part of Victoria, away from her family and friends. She can't, as Jenny's told us, can't tell her family and friends where she is because, of course, the perpetrator's going to go straight to them and say, where is she? So she's isolated. She has no access to money. How is she going to find or afford childcare? So she has to take the children with her to court. Now, the court waiting rooms are ginormous, much bigger than this space here. They are child unfriendly. You have to be there at 9:30 in the morning. You think you're only going to be there for an hour, so you take one sandwich and one juice bottle for your children. You might still be there at 3:30 in the afternoon. Your child has to be you can't focus on what you have to focus on because your child is tugging at you, bored silly, mummy, mummy, mummy all day. The child has to be re-traumatised by hearing in detail what they have experienced or witnessed or heard, and the alleged perpetrator's 2 metres behind your back. We say we're a society that cares for our children. I don't see that as good evidence of that. So Moorabbin Court gave us, they had a room off the main waiting room, which had direct access to the toilets without going through the main waiting room. So we furnished it with child-friendly furniture and toys. Then how are we going to staff it? We don't have any paid staff at Impact whatsoever. Every single one of us is a volunteer. I have no interest in having paid staff. I'm not interested in developing a payroll headache. I've got enough headaches without that. So we then went to Emerge, which is a local refuge to where we are, and we've been helping them for well over a decade. Put to them our proposal, and they, of course, everybody who hears it thinks, don't you think it's an of course that there should be childcare in courts? Yeah. So I said, if you staff it, we'll fund it. And that's what we've been doing. There's been a bit of an abeyance during COVID, but it's been so successful that the court has asked us for a second day a week. Subject to funding, that's what we intend to do, and subject to funding, we need to spread this out around Victoria. Other courts that have heard about it are screaming out for it. But how am I going to do that? You know, money doesn't grow on trees. Firstly, there's a fundraising issue. Okay, we'll work that out. But secondly, should this be the role of volunteers? Shouldn't this be a government responsibility? So off I go to talk to my local member. And he looks at me and says, what do you mean there's no childcare in court? Right? No, everybody is surprised. So he offered to do a member's statement in Parliament. Now, to tell you the truth, his statement was pretty lousy. But what he did after that was amazing. He invited us to morning tea, to which he invited MPs of all political parties. So I had about 30 other members from every political party that you can think of. And to a person, what do you mean there's no? So it's now on the table. And I'm really clear that I want to extend this program as much as we can, subject to funding, with the clear expectation that Parliament, whichever government, whichever party is in power, because they all work really slowly, will get on board. But then there's a complication, because childcare courts and family violence, and I always get mixed up, two of them belong to state, one belongs to federal, or the other way around. So I've got to tell you, I'm in the ear of a lot of politicians, and when I'm determined, I don't give up. I'm a bit of a bulldog. I hope I'm a bit of a polite bulldog, but I'm letting them know this is not good enough. If we're serious about children and their safety, then when they're in the most vulnerable of places they can be, we've got to be doing something about it. So that's our big fundraising drive, I suppose. And we do a lot more besides. We do all of this with no paid staff and no government support. And until January of this year, we also did it with no paid storage facility. So when we started and we were tiny, all the donations and everything was stored in my 2-bedroom flat. And then other people had to start storing things in their garages as well, in their roof spaces. And then the City of Glen Ira was really found a warehouse for us that we could use for 3 years at $1 a year rent. So when Alan and I went to sign the lease, Alan went with $3 and said, can we pay in advance? And they said, not till we raise an invoice. And of course, they never raised an invoice. As you all know, apparently we don't have enough apartments and supermarkets in Victoria. So our warehouse was being demolished and we had to find somewhere else to go. And that was a real headache. We found a wonderful space. You've been in that space. Unfortunately, we have to pay for it. So until this year, we didn't pay for anything. So we've had 6 months in the last financial year of having to pay rent. Even with that, our operating expenses were 3.8%. Basically, every cent that's given to us, we use to fulfil our mission. And I'm really, really proud of that statistic. So how do we do all that? We do it because people care. People give us their time. They give us their skills. They give us some money. We're tax deductible, so in theory you can give twice as much as you think you can, guys. They give us goods, new goods, anything a woman, child or teenager might need or want. And the wants are important. Yes, we put the basics, the toothbrush and the hair comb and the toothpaste and the soap and the shampoo. But we also put accessories. We also put chocolate. We also do things that just make you feel better because you deserve it, because you're a human being. So what am I asking you to do? 4 things. I want you to share what you've heard today with other people. I know that we've been talking about domestic violence a little bit more in recent years in the media. I'm sure you've heard some things today you didn't know. I'm sure that the extent of it is greater than you thought. So talk about it, share what you've learned. Connect with Impact, and I'll give you some connection details in a moment. Volunteer your time. 2 hours, we've got jobs for everyone. Our oldest volunteer said that she will admit to 86, which means that she might be a bit older. We've had babies come, but you can't really call them as volunteers, but we do welcome children from about the age of 5. Now, to tell you the truth, do children, are they useful? No, they're not. But how else are we going to teach social justice and volunteerism other than through modelling? So we welcome them. And then the teacher in me puts a rod on her back and we ask the parents, what school does your child go to? and I make a note of it, and we write a certificate of appreciation for every child who comes. We don't send it home, we send it to their school for the school to present. I don't care if the kids come back to us or not. What I care about is that they're turned on to volunteerism. We had a policeman, his name was John, and he used to come with his little boy Matthew quite regularly. And then one year he turned up with 6 children. I said, John, where did they come from? I said, Kathy, they all want certificates. And finally, donate. Donate some funds if you can. Donate goods. Go home, look in your gift cupboard. What have you been given that you've never opened, you never will open, you never will be? We'll take them. We know heaps of people that we can give them to who have nothing and need to restart life. If you know shops or businesses that might be able to donate, especially perhaps they've had stuff sitting on their shelves for ages that they can't move. It's costing them money and cleaning and dust. Donate it to us. It's a tax write-off for them. It helps us. The great example, a few years ago, the then owner of Lincraft called me and said, Kathy, I've got a big problem, but I think it's going to benefit you. What's the deal? Said, we've just had 3 truckloads of new bed linen delivered. We can't sell it because the buyer didn't check copyright. Can you use it? Yes, thank you. So we had truckloads of bed linen to give away. So, just your imagination is your limit. So that's what I want to say to you. And I'm going to do one last shameless plug. We've got the opportunity to do Christmas gift wrapping at Maya Southland in December. And we're looking for volunteers who don't mind giving who love gift wrapping and happy to do 2 hours as a volunteer. Contact me and I'll pass you on to the lady who's coordinating it for us. We'd love you to come and help. And finally, please take out your mobile phones and capture my contact details, because I'd love to stay in contact, because it's people like you who care about society and the world who we need to make this a much healthier society and world and can make an impact. Thank you. I welcome any arguments or questions or debates.
I was about to say, thank you very much, Kathy, for your presentation, and I invite questions from the people here or from those on Zoom.
So what I was going to say, and as I said, people may not want to hear it, but for those of you who don't know me, I was doing volunteering on the streets with street pastors, and we were just a practical help to people who are out on the streets. Unfortunately, due to a lack of volunteers and things like that, after I don't know how many years now, but we've officially decided to give up our organisation. But what people would say is, I'm too old, I can't be out on the streets, I can't help. So to everyone who said that to me, you sure can sit down and wrap gifts or do something to, help another organisation.
100%. Sorry to interrupt, I'm rude, but I'm going to still interrupt while I'm thinking about it. Every bag of love gets a letter, a form letter, but we get volunteers to write a personal note on it. That's the note that Jenny said, you are loved. We put our toiletries into a toilet bag that people sew for us. It's really simple sewing, a rectangle with a drawstring. And if you haven't got the fabric, we've got fabric to give you. So there are jobs you can do at home as well.
Yeah. I know that not everyone can volunteer, but I mean, there's so much that we can do to help out other people, and it doesn't have to be a physical task, but yeah, there's lots of ways that we can help out. So I'm like you, I just want everyone to volunteer. So there's lots of ways to do it. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Kathy. And thanks also to Jenny and to Maria for giving up your time today, for sharing with us, for raising our awareness of this issue and of our ability to do something, to make change. And thank you to those of you who have come today, either in person or on Zoom. And I would join with all of our speakers in encouraging you to share this message, to raise awareness and to be part of making positive change. Not just for women, not just for children, but for everyone. Because while our masculinity is infected with this, while our world and our society is infected with this, we can't live we cannot live out the best lives of everyone, and our society is made poorer for it. Thank you very much for coming, everyone. I want to say that this closes our meeting today. And for those of you who want it, a blessing on you. And for those of you who aren't into that kind of thing, I hope you have a marvelous day. Thank you, everyone, and good day.